Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 27. And I am recording this on Tuesday, day before patch day. Just another work day. Been back home doing work. So, yeah. Let's see. Like I said, patch tomorrow. We'll see how it goes. It's still too early. It's just now going live to OCE and things like that. I'm recording this. I just got back from tacos with my wife. It was Tuesday, and I didn't have an afternoon meeting, so I was able to sneak away and go to our taco place that we like to go to and have tacos with her. So that was nice. But yeah, so we'll see how everything lands. I know right now there's some fears around how much did the List Seraphine bug actually affect that comp? How much, is Belveth Aatrox going to be a problem? So we'll see. But realistically right now, what I'll tell you is my work is in Futureland. Working on things like the next set and the set after and stuff like that. So if anything, now most of my meetings are actually getting to the point where they're mostly caught up, and I actually get to sit and load up the computer and do some actual grade A design work that I enjoy. So I'm going to kind of enjoy my afternoon working on that after I record this. So that'll be nice. Someone had a really cool idea, by the way, of doing Walk the Dogs on a future set. And then recording them but not releasing them until the set actually goes live, which I thought was a really cool idea. So if I find the right set, I might try to create something like that. I think that'd be really cool, but we'll see. Either way, definitely appreciate the idea. So, all right, today's questions I actually thought were pretty meaty. Some pretty good ones here. So the first question is, should it be possible to demote from Master? And this is a question that comes up all the time. And, if for those who don't know, way back, I want to say set 4, I don't remember the exact set we did it, but it used to be possible to demote, right? You would literally get to Diamond 4, be like, sweet, then go bot 4, go to 0 LP, and then if you bot for it again, well, you're down another thing. At the time, it wasn't Emerald, because Emerald wasn't around, it was Plat. But yeah, you could just demote at all tiers. And what we found pretty quickly was that this created a situation where players would feel like, okay, I just reached a plateau and I'm going to stop playing now, right? Because I want my end of season rewards. I want to, well, not just the rewards, but also I want to be sitting in Diamond, right? So it created a natural churn point for players to stop playing, which obviously just isn't great. And, you could take this into a dark thing of well, all you care about is player hours. And it's well, no, it's just, if you're feeling this handcuff that well, I don't want to play because I don't want to lose my accomplishment, that's just bad design, right? Players should feel safe to continue to play the game. So we changed it. Now, I will say that has come with one really big trade-off that I've been saying for years we need to fix, which is now, let's say you hit Diamond 4, you can no longer demote, and you bot for 10 times. Well, now what's actually happening is behind the scenes, your MMR rank, because basically MMR and rank are two things that say very similar things, but it's just MMR is actually where you are, and rank is a feel-good progression system. So your feel-good progression system says you're still Diamond 4, but your MMR says, actually, you're Emerald 4 or maybe even lower. And so then what happens is the game tries to keep both your MMR and your shown rank as close as possible. And so you get in this situation where you sort of have to regrind that back up, but it takes a long time. And until you do that, you're in this world where you get first, you gain 30 LP, and you go 8th, and you lose 80 LP, and it feels super bad, and you feel like you can no longer make progress. And that is the current churn moment right now. When people get to that state, that's where they go, okay, this isn't worth it anymore. I can't climb. I'm stuck here. This is going to take forever. I'm out, right? And so right now we have that as the negative here. And again, to me, this is actually one of the things I think we need to fix soon. I believe that's just a terrible experience to be in, and so hopefully we can get this fixed someday, but definitely something I think that should happen. So now to specifically answer this question, though, the player is saying, well, what about at Masters, right? Like Masters is this sort of apex tier where I believe you should be able to demote. Now, the other thing I have to talk about is as far as time invested, remember that only like 1 to 2% of our players hit Masters. So if we solve this problem, that's about the number of people we're engaging with. Now, that is 1 to 2% of our most dedicated players, but just knowing that like that's one of the reasons why it can be tough sometimes to justify like a big systemic change here. All of that is to say that I believe hitting apex tier should be like a cool thing. And once you reach that apex tier, no, I do not believe you should be allowed to be excluded from it. I think it's like a big accomplishment. I think reaching Masters is sort of like the last checkpoint before the real ranked grind, right? Like, and that's not to say that, Diamond and Emerald aren't real ranked. It's more just at the top tier. This is like, okay, now you need to be willing to suck it up. And this is like as competitive as it gets. So I think like once you hit Master, you should be locked in. You should not be able to demote. However, what I'll also say is right now, if you are in Master and you want to reach the next step, like what's the next step for you? Grandmaster. Okay. Right now in NA, how much LP do you need to hit Grandmaster? I think it's like 600 right now. And so 600 LP is a long time to grind before another checkpoint that feels good. And so I believe there actually is some work we should be doing in that apex tier to make those players have an engaging experience. Because again, these are a lot of our most engaged players. I think Kent, for example, recently hit Masters and he was like, cool, I want to keep playing. How far do I have to go next? Oh, 600 LP? That's too far away. I'm probably going to stop playing, right? And so, dumb example here. This is fake. This is not something we're actually doing. Don't take this as like a real thing. But let's pretend at Masters, we had Masters 4, 3, 2, 1, and then 500 LP is like Super Masters. And we did that all the way until you were in the top 750, at which point you can be Grandmasters and Challengers, right? It's like, let's pretend we had all those checkpoints. I am totally fine with within that apex tier demoting all the way down, right? Like this is the spot where you have reached, you're in the hardcore. And if you want to go from 1,000 LP to 0 LP in a day, be my guest, right? Like that should be allowed. But I do believe there need to be sort of like lines in the sand where it's like, nope, you can't demote from here. You've done it. You've made it to this bracket. And I think every other modern ranked system has this now, actually. So, yeah, I think the trade-offs there are just too high. Would I ever undo it? No, I don't think I would, especially pre-Masters. But even at Masters, Masters does feel like the last one, though. So, again, my 2 cents here is, should a player be able to demote from Masters? The answer is no. I do not believe they should. So, cool. All right. Next question. How do you feel about support champions this set? Now, for those who have followed me for a long time, you'll know that in a typical 60 champion set, I believe support champions had no place in TFT, specifically because they created weird incentives around whether or not you should itemize them. They didn't scale well with items. They were a trap to put items on, but also they were the best itemless champions, so they were almost auto-include in every comp, which was very unintuitive. And when you only have so many 4-cost carries, for example, if you waste a slot on a support champion, well, then you just have less carries, which means less endgame variety, which is pretty bad. And I still believe that for a 60 champion set. However, for a 100 champion set, I believe we can try some support champions. Things like Sona, Orianna, I think are good examples here. Having them both be Invoker, maybe not great, but I think support champions is fine. I think Ornn is an example of a support champion right now, for better or worse. Not sure he was intended to be, but essentially he's a farmer of artifacts. What I will say is I don't think we were ambitious enough with support items. I don't think we pushed the bounds of support champions, not items. I don't think we pushed the bounds of support items. Support champions. God, I'm not dyslexic, I swear. I don't think we pushed the bounds of support champions enough. And I think even if you look at the latest patch notes, Sona getting her heal nerfed actually shows that like even the support champions we have are getting pushed out back into carries. right? Like both Sona and Orianna got their support output nerfed, which to me just shows like this tendency to put things back into carries. So I don't know. Basically, I still, if we were to do another set like set 16, I would actually purposely try to target even more support outputs. But the other thing I'd say is we actually need to be better about making it clear what is a support champion or not, right? We have the roles revamped. Should we add a support role that has different rules? A really dumb example would be, imagine if support champions could only have one item equipped, right? Like that's a really extreme example, but it'd be like, oh, well, very clearly you're just not supposed to put 3 items on these champions, but they're really valuable for the traits they provide and the output they do, and so like that could be an example. But that's one of the neat things about TFT is that if we continue to have, a bigger roster, we can do more things like that, right? With 60 champions, it's like, well, you need so many carries and so many tanks to make sure there's enough variety. So yeah, my take on this set though is that we really didn't push the bounds enough. And so we didn't really get any like major key learnings, right? Like again, using Sona and Orianna as the example, I feel like the learning was, well, we tried it and this confused people and they still put 3 items on them. But then when they couldn't carry, they wanted them buffed. So we buffed the damage. And then they became carries who could also heal, right? Like Sona's damage never offends me. It's quite good for a 1 cost. But the fact that she does that while also healing 5,000 is a problem, But if you nerf the damage, then she never ends fights and you don't win, right? Like, and that's been the problem, is that like Sona to me is not a success in that regard. So yeah, overall, I just don't feel like we pushed the bounds enough. I am still interested in the space. I'm glad we at least dipped our toes in the water, but I think we should have gone a bit harder. So, and hopefully we'll have a chance to do that again in the future, is my hope. So, there you go. All right, next question. What happened to ranged tank units like Vlad, Annie, and Thresh? This was tanks that had 2 range, generally, because it didn't really look right for champions like Thresh to have a 1 auto attack range. So originally, back in the day, Whitrock was a big proponent of this. We had these 2 range champions. And generally it was fine-ish, right? Like if we put them back in the game, I don't think it would break too much. But what we kept running into was they were just like less functional than other tanks. And what I mean by that is like, if you have a tank, and let's say you're going for set, right? So you have Wukong in the front line, and you put another tank in the back line. And you want that tank to walk up and join the fight. Well, having them stay an extra hex back means all of a sudden the enemy melee carries are closer to your carries, right? You're like, I don't want you to be on row 2. I want you to move up to row 1. But the 2 range prevented that. In addition, it would lead to some situations where like instead of moving forward to go like get a melee carry, they would just sit there at 2 range, which would block some of your other champions. So your 1 range tank would have to walk around the 2 range tank, leading to some really awkward positioning as well. And so basically the 2 range tanks and the 1 range tanks with our current movement system didn't interact well. And you almost never wanted your tank to be 2 range. Like it didn't, like if you were running a Vlad by itself in the front line in the center, okay, fine. It doesn't really bother you. But again, if you're trying to run a multiple tank front line, it just created a lot of issues. And we found both internally and externally, people were just like, could you make their range 1, please? If the range was 1, I wouldn't be running into these issues. And so eventually we kind of just stopped really trying because we knew the issues we'd keep running into. And I don't think spending a bunch of time to be like, okay, let's fix our movement system so that 2 range tanks are now more prominent doesn't really get us a lot of value, right? Like whether or not Annie is 1 range or 2 range from a player perspective doesn't actually change that much. You're not making any real interesting decisions, And in fact, most of the time the decisions are, I wish she'd just walk up to the front line. The only thing we really lost, and this is something, again, like Whitrock's better at, is that Thresh, for example, attacking, is like his auto attack animations are meant to be at range. They look better at that 2 range. But having it at one range, it just looks worse. So we do trade off some of that like combat satisfaction. The issue with that argument, though, is that, well, if I have a 2-range tank like Thresh, and you have a 1-range tank, well, guess what happens? The 1-range tank walks up anyway, and we're still looking at animations that are one hex. So it's like, what's the difference? What did we actually gain here? So all of this is to say that we've tried 2-hex tanks. It didn't really work, created more problems than the value it provided. So to simplify the system, all tanks are generally 1 range. Will we ever try 2 range again? Probably. There's probably a designer who will think it's a clever idea and they'll try to make it work, and maybe we'll ship it. But overall, I'm not convinced, and so I'm certainly not in a hurry to re-pursue 2 range tanks ever again. So I don't think they add much to the game. It's my current thought. So, cool. All right. Next question. I'm adding a couple words to this question because the actual question was, how often does Riot look at non-balanced feedback on this Discord? And so I'm going to extrapolate that to how often does Riot look at non-balanced feedback on Discord, Reddit, Twitter, etc., social media, you name it. Like, how often do we look? So the answer is both a lot and not a lot. And what I mean by that is, like, if you have someone who's obsessed with the quality of the game, like, say, one of our live designers or myself or, anyone on the team, they'll probably read these various sources, right? They'll read the Discord. They'll go, oh, that's what players are thinking, right? Like, I read every DM I get. I read every Twitter reply. So we're all reading it. And so we definitely ingest it. But a lot of it is also, frankly, noise, right? Like, imagine if you got, 200 messages a day telling you what you were doing right and wrong, right? You can't necessarily spend a lot of time with each individual message. But they sort of create a volume of common patterns and things like that. The other thing we have to be careful with is that TFT is a global game played by people in, North America and Europe and China and Taiwan and blah, 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 all the various regions across the world, Korea, etc. Right? And if you as a normal North American person are only reading the North American Reddit and English Twitter, that is one perspective, but it will bias you to that perspective. But maybe you're not aware of like what your Japanese players are looking for, or maybe you're not aware with some of the issues that our SEA players are facing, right? And so you have to be really careful not to anchor to any of that feedback too hard. And so one of the things we have on our team is what we call our insights team. And our insights team will gather a lot of this stuff and sort of use it, like a more group analysis. They'll help share. We also work with like different regions. So for example, after a particular patch, some of our China members will actually say, hey, here's the feedback we're seeing specifically in China. Korea actually also does similarly, where it's like, hey, here's the feedback we're seeing specifically from Korea players. And we can use that and all sort of look for patterns and look for things that are like really an issue, right? Like, silly example that's obvious, but it's like, if China and Korea and North America and Reddit are all saying 3-star forecasts are a problem, chances are it's a problem, But to give a counterexample, if, Reddit is saying Ishtal is the best cash out trade ever made, but Korea and China are saying Ishtal is a pain in the ass and hard to play, right? Like, you need to take both of those into account and make sure you're really getting a good analysis of like, well, what is it about North American players that causes them to like it versus what is it that China and Korea maybe aren't getting from that trait. And again, by the way, this is a fake example. I am not saying China doesn't like Ishtal or Korea doesn't like Ishtal. I am using it as a hypothetical example. Let me be very clear on that. But I'm also showing you how I would approach that if I got that information, right? It would be like, well, maybe it's because there's so much power in Brock, and what Korea really looks for is those like 200 gold cash outs, and they're just not getting it because the cash outs are fairly straightforward and it's just Brock and some items. That would be one example of an analysis you could make. So all of it is a lot of noise, and it's a good problem to have because we're such a popular game that has a lot of players. We get a lot of feedback from across the globe, right? Like, this person asked about the Discord, and that Discord probably gets, a thread or two a day. But then, you've got the Reddit, you've got the Twitter, you've got everything else. And again, not to mention through the other countries and things like that. In Lobby 2 the other day, when we were talking about the Lysandra Seraphine bug, there was a player from China who was like, hey, we posted about this bug 8 days ago in this video that was on our public site. And it was like, yeah, you're right. Didn't see it because we don't see literally every video and every post, right? Like we try to keep up, but we missed that one, and no one had really flagged it to us. So, I can only consume so much social media before I go insane. So, but again, this answer is, how often do we look at the feedback? Very, very often. And it helps inform what our current players believe. But the other thing I'll also call out, and this, I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole, is that basically right now, social media and a lot of the things around social media incentivize negativity bias pretty heavily. You are rewarded with more clicks the more negative you are. And so, or another common way of phrasing this is like, people who are having fun are playing the game. People who aren't having fun are posting on social media. And so it can also give you a very warped perspective of how many players may be liking or disliking something, right? If there are 5 new Reddit posts and all the new Reddit posts say, this patch is garbage, does that mean this patch is garbage? Not necessarily. I'd be a fool to say, no, they're just wrong. But it is one of those things that you have to be careful in your analysis to make sure that it's like you don't jump to the immediate conclusion. You have to really look into it. And again, this is where our insights team can help us out a lot to make sure that we're gathering the right conclusions. Now, again, if there's 5 Reddit posts that say this package is garbage, we should at least be looking at like, well, why are these 5 players particularly unhappy? But again, that's what you just have to be careful with your conclusions. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. All right, I think I'm making good time. Yep. All right, I can do the last question. 5 questions in one day. This is a productive day here. Should every base item, have a unit that it's BIS for? Especially if we have like flexible items like Adaptive Helm versus specific items like Ginsu's. Should every item have a champion that they're BIS for? The answer, like the just yes or no answer to this is no. No, they shouldn't. But I think a better way of framing this question that gets you to the yes is, should every item have a couple champions that you were excited to put this on? That answer should be yes, right? Because, for example, Adaptive Helm is a much more flexible item than Shojin. So would it bother me if Adaptive Helm was nobody's BIS? No, it wouldn't, right? Because like, if Shojin is always better than Adaptive Helm by like 5%, but Adaptive Helm is much more flexible and has good item economy, that's fine, right? So like that would not bother me. That's an example where I'm just like, yep, great, Adaptive Helm is doing its job. It's not quite as good as Gargoyle, but it's more flexible than Gargoyle. Great, no problem, right? Likewise, something that provides a unique output, right? I don't think Void Staff is anyone's BIS, but you definitely need it, right? You definitely want that shred, for sure. Same with Sunfire. Sunfire is worse than Mortdog, but do you need that burn? Yes, absolutely, right? So that kind of makes it BIS, even though it's not true BIS. But again, going by the framing, all the examples I've listed, there's at least someone you're excited to put it on, right? Adaptive Helm, you're still excited to put it on a Sona or a Mel or whatever. Sunfire, you're still excited to put it on your front line, no problem. When the answer to this, though, is that nobody's excited to put it on, that's where I think we're off, right? So like Edge of Night pre-buff always felt just much worse, and you were never really excited to put it on anyone except like Yasuo, maybe? And even then it was debatable, But obviously the biggest example right now is if you think through all the items, I think there are 2 that you could pop this question on. The first is, technically Thieves Gloves does not fit this bill. If you have a Thieves Gloves, is there a particular champion you're excited to put it on? Well, no, because it's literally the most flexible item, right? You're just supposed to, it's a value item that gives you like 1.5 to 2 items of value randomly on any champion, but it's not anyone's BIS. Is that a problem? No, that one's not a problem. But the other one that I would claim as a problem would be Crown Guard. Crown Guard, right, to me right now, I can't think of anyone I'm like excited to put this on. After roles revamped, the extra armor doesn't really matter on fighters, and it just feels like a worse tank item. So, like, am I excited to put this on Thresh, for example? No, not really. Am I excited to put this on, I don't know, Garen? Nope, not really. Am I excited to put this on a 12,000 health Scion? Nope, not really. The AP scaler on his shield isn't that big. Like, so to me, Crown Guard is an example that fails this pretty hard, and we should be looking to fix this or rework it or something like that, because it to me is the one item right now that I don't think I'm excited to put on anybody. But that's kind of my bar here. So again, should every item have someone it's BIS for? No, not necessarily. But every item should have someone you're excited to put it on, and that to me is important. Now, I'm walking around, so it's possible I haven't remembered another item. And part of this is also power, right? Because, like, let's take an item like Deathblade. Is Deathblade have clear users? Yeah, for sure. Are you ever excited to put a Deathblade on somebody? You know, it doesn't feel like it, right? Most of the people you'd put a Deathblade on, you'd almost rather have a Giant Slayer, or you'd rather have an Infinity Edge, things like that. Or even Kraken for a while, you know. So that's where the balance can really make a difference. But as we saw with like Nashers, 5 AP went from no one should ever build this to you should only build this. So, you know, Deathblade could literally be 3% damage amp off or something like that. So that's kind of my 2 cents there. So, all right, there you go. I'm a little past my lunch break. I should go sit down and get some work done, but wanted to get this recorded so that you guys had this and answered some good questions today. Cool. All right, patch day tomorrow, which means I get to do that usual thing where I wake up, check all the sites, and see where we're off and react to that. So, yeah. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Hope you guys have a great day and a great week and a great patch and all that stuff. Until next time, take it easy.